Ballarch 4, despite its flaws, actually did a lot for the Ballarch series moving forward. The introduction of Double Souls brought alongside with it not just these new, powerful transformations for Megaman, but also a revamping of the chip system, giving us new types of chips outside of the Fire, Aqua, Elec, and Wood cycle that we've had from the beginning of the series. In addition to the original 4 chip types, Ballarch 4 brought us Wind, Groundbreaking, Recovery, Invisible, Attack Plus, Breaker, Sword, and Obstacle type chips, many of which were simply given the null element in the first 3 games of the series. And no, I'm not forgetting about Cursor type chips. That type was introduced in Ballarch 5, whereas Groundbreaking type was taken out of the series after just 1 appearance. Since I've already made videos discussing which of Megaman's transformations is the best for each of the original types, I've decided to continue looking into the remaining transformations. And I figure I may as well go in the order that I already listed, starting with the Wind transformations. So get yourself comfortable, grab a snack, and get ready to listen to me rant about Megaman's Wind transformations for the next few minutes. Okay, rant isn't exactly the right word for this video. That'll be the recovery type video. If you know, you know. Before getting into it though, consider subscribing to my channel for some more Megaman Balor content. Seeing as there's 9 transformation types that I haven't discussed yet, I'll have 8 more of these videos to make after this one. And on top of that, I make several other videos, such as my folder decoder videos, where I showcase folders that I've used throughout the series, or my network evolution videos, where I go over how individual chips have changed throughout the Ballarch games. So if you're a fan of the Ballarch series, you'll definitely have something here for you to enjoy. But anyways, back to the topic at hand. In my previous video discussing the Wood type transformations in the Ballarch games, I started off by pointing out a couple of interesting things. Namely, Wood Style in Ballarch 2 introduced the ability for Megaman to heal his HP when standing on grass panels, and Wood Soul in Ballarch 4 introduced the Status Guard ability to prevent Megaman from becoming paralyzed, confused, immobilized, etc. Both of these abilities carried over into every Wood type transformation that followed, though the rate of healing on grass panels was adjusted in each successive game. I bring this up because all 3 of the Wind transformations in the series, those being Wind Soul, Gyro Soul, and Tengu Cross, also all share some abilities with each other, giving the Wind transformations 2 specific reasons as to why you should use them. First off, there's the Float Shoes and Air Shoes abilities. Air Shoes is shared by all 3 Wind transformations, and lets Megaman stand over any broken or whole panels. Float Shoes, on the other hand, is shared by Wind and Gyro Souls, letting them ignore the effects of various panel types. Notably, Wind and Gyro Souls will not take damage from lava or poison panels, will not slip on ice panels, and Gyro Soul will not be slowed down by sea panels or pushed off of magnet panels. The other shared ability for the Wind transformations is the ability for each of them to remove barriers and auras from an opponent. In a PvP setting, this ability is ridiculously good, as Life Aura and Barrier 200 are some of the most common chips for people to use in competitive matches. And rather than wasting your offensive chips on these defensive ones, it's much better to simply be able to remove them with your transformation's inherent abilities. As for which abilities these transformations have to remove auras and barriers, I'll discuss those individually when I go in depth on each transformation. So, moving right into Ballarch 4, we have Wind Soul introduced with the Double Soul system and the new Wind type chips that can be used to activate it. Well, I say new Wind chips, but these are all chips that actually existed previously. Tornado was introduced back in Ballarch 2, Airshot had been around since the previous title, and Windrak is honestly just Ballarch 3's Air Sword minus the sword aspect of it. In addition to the previously mentioned Air and Float Shoes, Wind Soul made quite a few unique changes to Megaman. For starters, his regular buster is actually replaced by a 5 damage air shot when Wind Soul is active. In addition, his charge attack becomes a 50 damage Wind Rack, which hits in the same range as a Wide Sword. Both of these attacks have some utility to them, as they both push enemies or obstacles when they hit them, which is especially good when using the Rock Cube chip. There's just something oh so satisfying about pushing a rock cube into an enemy when using Wind Soul. Of course, Wind Soul also amplifies the damage of all Wind type chips in the game, few as they may be. Whenever Wind Soul is active, all Wind type chips get a plus 10 damage buff, and while this only turns Airshot into a 30 damage chip and Wind Rack into a 110 damage chip, it can be kind of good for Tornado, since that chip hits 8 times for an overall plus 80 buff from 160 damage standard to 240 while Wind Soul empowers it. And yes, that plus 10 damage buff also applies to the Wind Demand chips as well. More notably than its damage buff, however, is the other effect of Wind Soul. You may have already noticed in the footage I've been showing that while Wind Soul is active, there will be a constant fan effect on the enemy's field, pulling viruses and navis towards their front column. This is perhaps the most important aspect of Wind Soul, as this ability can be very disruptive in PvP matches and can help you land chips with limited range, such as the tornado chip that I just mentioned. And lastly, there's Wind Soul's anti-aura option, which is to simply activate it in the first place. When Wind Soul is activated, it will cause a north wind to blow across the field, taking away auras and barriers on your opponents. It's basically the North Wind chip, but activated when you go into Wind Soul. And if you're concerned that this only applies to PvP, you'd actually be wrong, as Base will have an aura on himself when you battle him in Black Earth 2, which can be removed by Wind Soul. Overall, Wind Soul focuses a lot more on utility, but can utilize that damage modifier decently with the Tornado chip. Oh, and one last point to make about Wind Soul, that design slaps. Seriously, Wind Soul looks awesome. Moving on to Ballarch 5, we get the introduction of Gyro Soul and Team Protoman. Just like Wind Soul, Gyro Soul gets both float and air shoes, letting you walk over broken panels and ignore panel types. This is especially useful in the Undernet, which often has ice and lava panels on its fields, and the End area, which often has sea and magnet panels. And it's also really helpful against level 3 Meteor viruses, which can crack panels or turn panels into poison panels. The key distinction between Wind and Gyro Souls is in their damage modifiers. Whereas Wind Soul only provided plus 10 damage to wind chips, Gyro Soul can double the damage of non-dimming wind or null element chips with its unique ability, which I've discussed previously in these episodes of my Folder Decoder series. Basically, whenever you use a wind chip while Gyro Soul is active, the propeller on Megaman's back begins to spin. While the propeller is spinning, the next wind or null chip that you use will have its damage doubled. If you use a wind chip while the propeller is spinning, it gets the double damage and the propeller continues to spin until you use a null chip instead. We'll talk about the chips that this works best with later on in the video. Now for Gyro Soul's aura removal option. This one is an upgrade over Wind Soul's North Wind effect, as it's actually Gyro Soul's Tornado Arm Charge attack that removes auras. This attack extends 3 panels ahead of Megaman, hitting 1 time 1 panel away, 2 times 2 panels away, and 3 times 3 panels away. Any of the hits will remove barriers and auras, so while the attack isn't guaranteed to remove them saying as it can miss, it has more chances to remove them and can remove multiple barriers or auras if they're used while Gyro Soul is still active. Oh, and Gyro Soul's design slaps. Look at this thing. It looks so badass. 10 out of 10 design, I absolutely love it. Finally, in Ballarch 6, we have Tengu Cross to go alongside our little birdie friend, Falzar. As mentioned earlier, Tengu Cross doesn't actually have float shoes, so you'll still be slipping on ice panels and taking damage from poison panels while it's active. However, Tengu Cross does still have access to air shoes, so once again, holes are no issue for it. In terms of damage, Tengu Cross is actually a near copy of Wind Soul. It similarly gives plus 10 damage to wind chips, although this time the damage increase is only applied to non-dimming ones, so the Tengu Man Navi chip will not be getting that buff. Still, this plus 10 damage is once again useful on Tornado, and is also useful on the other multi-hitting wind chip in the game, that being Air Spin. And of course, Tengu Cross had a new way of removing barriers and auras. By pressing left and B at the same time, Tengu Cross creates a brief fan effect, similar to Wind Soul's, but activated only when you want it to activate. This effect also pulls in enemies once again, letting you position enemies in their front column if and when you want to do so. However, this isn't Tengu Cross's only way of removing barriers, as every wind type attack in Ballarch 6 has the ability to remove them, including the Tengu Rack Charge attack, which is just Wind Rack. Oh, and last but not least, there's the fact that the design of Tengu Cross absolutely slaps. That's another thing that all the wind transformations have in common, I guess. So now it's time to determine which of the transformations is the best one. And once again, there isn't a single obvious answer. Wind transformations inherently are based strongly on the utility that they provide, given that they all share the same abilities in float shoes, air shoes, and the ability to remove barriers and auras. Since they're all so similar, we need to really look at the minor details to come up with an answer to which one of them is the best, which is going to be extremely subjective in this case, more so than it has been in my other videos. So let's look at the smaller details. For starters, we need to remember that Tengu Cross doesn't have access to float shoes. While not as important as air shoes in my opinion, it's still really weird that Tengu Cross didn't receive float shoes the way that Wind and Gyro Souls did, though that could be because Falter Beast Out has it instead. This puts Tengu Cross slightly behind the Souls, but not by a whole lot. What I do like about Tengu Cross is its ability to activate its fan effect whenever you want to pull in enemies and remove barriers, which is the primary reason why it's used in the first place. On the other hand, Gyro Soul doesn't really get any extra utility in comparison, and while Wind Soul's fan effect is constant, that can be a bit annoying when it comes to trying to land some hits. Plus, there's the fact that Wind Soul's Northwind effect can only be used once per battle when you go into Wind Soul. So overall, I'd actually say that despite it lacking float shoes, Tengu Cross has the best utility among the three, as you can pull in enemies and remove barriers whenever you want with its back and B ability. As for damage, let's not waste any time, it's obviously Gyro Soul. Wind Soul and Tengu Cross sharing a simple plus 10 damage modifier on wind chips is so far behind Gyro Soul's ability to double damage on wind and null chips that it's not even a competition. By far, Gyro Soul is the only one of these transformations that you'll use for its damage potential rather for its utility. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't use the other two for damage, it's just that their damage is a bit lacking, at least for wind chips specifically, but let's start looking at the chips that you can use with these transformations to fully utilize their potential. For starters, let's discuss Wind Soul. At first glance, you'd think that the only viable strategy for it is to use Tornado for what effectively becomes a 1.5 times damage multiplier on it. And yes, you absolutely can do this, especially since Wind Soul's fan effect pulls enemies into range of Tornado, and you can even pair it with Sand Ring to get a 3 times damage Tornado on an enemy standing on a sand pit. But this is actually an overly simplistic way of looking at Wind Soul. There are two other viable strategies that can use Wind Soul very well in my opinion. The first one really uses that fan effect well, which is pairing it with sword chips. Usually, they're limited by their low range and require you to use either Area Grab or my beloved Protosoul to use them properly. However, with Wind Souls constantly pulling in enemies, you can easily hit enemies with sword chips even with their range limitation. Alternatively, you can use Wind Soul to pull off a combo that would normally be reserved for Aqua Soul, that being the Blizzard and Element Ice combo. Element Ice becomes a multi-hit chip that extends down an entire row when you use it while standing on an ice panel, which is easy to do thanks to Wind Soul's Float Shoes ability. This combo is actually the main way that I dealt damage late in my Wind Soul only run of Balor 4, and can work really well when paired with the Blinder chip to remove iframes, since even though it's multi-hitting, Element Ice still causes flashing. And of course, you also want to throw in some rock cubes into your folder when planning on using Wind Soul. Meanwhile, Gyro Soul is the big damage dealer of the trio, as I've previously mentioned, and I've designed two folders that perfectly utilize its damage potential. Both of these folders have been showcased in my folder decoder series, so I won't go into too much detail on them here, but to keep things brief, Gyro Soul unsurprisingly uses Tornado extremely well, giving it the power to one-shot delete base XX from full HP. Gyro Soul also likes to use the Silver Bullet combo thanks to its time to damage on null chips. For more in-depth analysis on these folders, make sure to watch my folder decoder episodes detailing them, both of which will be linked in the description. And then there's Tengu Cross. And yes, once again, Tornado is still an amazing chip, but this time, Tornado isn't used for its own damage, but rather it's used to make the air spin chip blow your enemies away. In Ballarch 6 specifically, hitting the air spin object with wind attacks makes it spin an additional time for more damage, and seeing as Tornado hits 8 times, I'm pretty sure that air spin will get 8 additional spins when hit by a tornado, greatly increasing its damage. That being said, I think that the plus 10 damage actually causes it to break your air spin, but I'm not 100% certain on that. What I do know is that Tornado, Airspin 2, and Airspin 3 all come in the T code, as does the Tengu Man chip, so go have fun with that bit of knowledge. But we're actually not done with Tengu Cross yet, because there is one other very important folder that takes Tengu Cross and turns its utility into a way of dealing damage. In previous videos, I've mentioned how when an enemy standing on an ice panel in Ballarch 6 gets hit by an Aqua type attack, that enemy will become frozen. And when a frozen enemy is hit by a breaker type chip, that chip will deal double damage. This is most commonly done with Golem Hit 3, a chip that does 250 damage normally and is doubled to 500 on a frozen enemy, but that chip can only damage the opponent's front column. However, this is where Tengu Cross comes into play. With Tengu Cross active, you can freeze your opponent, then use your left B ability to pull them into their front column while they're still frozen, letting you land a guaranteed Golem Hit 3 for massive damage. This folder is ridiculously strong and one that is viable in both PvE and PvP gameplay, and is definitely one I'll need to make a folder decoder episode about eventually. And with that, we've gone over everything that I wanted to discuss about Megaman's wind type transformations. Truly, you can't go wrong with using them. Of the three, Wind Soul is my least favorite one, but is still incredibly good when used in the right hands. Unsurprisingly, since I love doing big damage all at once, Gyro Soul is my personal favorite among the three. But again, you really can't go wrong with using any of them. Their overall utility and even their damage modifications, while nothing crazy on Wind Soul and Tengu Cross, get the job done. And for the final time, they all look dope as hell. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and stick around for some more Megaman Balor content in the future. I'll have my folder decoder series that I mentioned in this video linked down in the description, as well as my network evolution series for anyone interested in those. And if you're interested in my discussions about which transformations of the other types will be the best ones, I'll be working on those videos soon too. Next up will be the groundbreaking type transformations, which will be... oh, right. Well, I guess we already know which of the single groundbreaking transformations is the strongest. I guess Gut Soul just gets its own video. And as always, thanks for watching.